You'll hear all about our work to ban insurrectionists from the ballot and how you can get involved. If you're here in the Zoom, let us know your name and where you're from in the chat. Also, you can help us build this call by sharing the link on your Facebook and Twitter, and make sure you're following Our Revolution on social media so you can stay up to date with what is going on in the movement. We're dropping those links now in the chat, the Facebook and Twitter, so please be on the lookout for those. For folks joining us by phone or watching live on social media, we'd love for you to join us here in the Zoom, where you can interact with our guests and one another. We're dropping the link into our Zoom now in our social media streams, and if you're on the phone, you can press *3 and an operator will help you transfer over. The link to get into the Zoom tonight for this very special broadcast is ourrev.us/14 and the number 3. That's ourrev.us/14.3. Again, my name is Christy Lara, and I'm super happy you're with us tonight. Awesome to see all of you guys here for this very important, for this very important Defend Democracy Town Hall. Tonight we'll be talking with Our Revolution members and their lawyers who are taking the fight directly to far-right extremists in office. Our partners at Free Speech for People, President and co-founder John Bonifaz, and 14.3 campaign director Alexandra Fluss Quality will join work to ban insurrectionists, and we'll tell you what you can do to help us make that mission and get it accomplished. We want to welcome everyone who's joining us here in the chat. Please take a moment to introduce yourselves, what state you're organizing with, and also let us know what got you, inspired to join this call, what you hope to see out of the 14.3 campaign. We're excited to know and hear from all of you. As the call is building, you can take action right now by signing our petition that will go out to Secretaries of State, urging them to recognize that insurrectionists have disqualified themselves from running for office and keep their names off the ballot in these 2022 elections. And we can all think of a very specific name we do not want on the ballot in the upcoming presidential election cycle. Let's not forget the means to the ends of this. Our revolution is taking on right-wing extremists directly, and our members, along with Free Speech for People, have stood up to file challenges against Madison Cawthorn in North Carolina, Marjorie Taylor Greene in Georgia, and Paul Gosar in Arizona, and we're just getting started. We're looking for progressive patriots to carry out on this fight against insurrectionists in Oregon and in Colorado. You may receive a phone call from our phone bank force asking you to sign on to these efforts, so please be on the lookout for that. One way we can take action right now is to sign the petition calling for this effort. You can go to the link at ourrevolution.com/bar insurrectionists from the ballot. That will take you directly to the petition form. Again, just go to our website, ourrevolution.com. It'll be also in the events section, as well as the latest newsletter, the Our Revolution newsletter we send out every weekend. This last one was sent out on May 1st to celebrate Labor Day, so please take a look out for that. Again, I want to welcome everyone that's here in the Zoom, as well as joining us by phones. Thousands of people join us on these organizing calls via cell phone and Zoom, so we want to thank everyone who's taking time out of their day to organize with us and the progressive movement. We're going to let the call just build a little bit longer, and again, please take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat. This is a very special call being organized by Our Revolution and Free Speech for People. So we want to know what inspired you to be here, what you're doing in your state to help organize these efforts, and what you hope as a movement, as a coalition, we can achieve together. One more time, if you're one of the thousands of folks calling in, please join us directly in Zoom for a more interactive experience by pressing *3, and an operator will get you to ourrev.us/Zoom, and that'll bring you right into this meeting. The link is ourrev/Zoom. That's ourrev.us/Zoom. And with that, I'm going to take a few minutes to introduce our host for the evening, our Our Revolution organizing coordinator, Hal Ginsberg. Hal, take it away.
Thank you so much, Christy. It's great to talk to you. It's great to hear your voice this evening, and I always enjoy the introductions. You really bring a great, excited spirit and pep to these calls. So we really love the tone. Thank you so much, Christy. It's just always been an honor to work with you and the entire team here at Our Revolution. And I've got a new team I'm working with as well. We're going to meet some of the folks at Free Speech for People in just a moment at our special 14.3 Defend Democracy Town Hall. Tonight, we're going to dig into that campaign, the 14.3 campaign. That's to bar insurrectionists from the ballot in accordance with the Constitution. And what part of the Constitution? Well, Amendment 14, Section 3. It states that any elected official who aids a violent rebellion against our government cannot hold office going forward. You're just barred. You're disqualified. It's that simple. And that means that with Representatives Marjorie Taylor Greene, Paul Gosar, former President Donald Trump, and many others seeking re-election, people who fomented the January 6, 2021 attacks on the Capitol, when they did that, they violated their oath of office, they violated the U.S. Constitution, Amendment 14, Section 3, and they are therefore disqualified from running for office. Our Legal Eagles, Free Speech for People, a nonprofit legal law firm, has developed a brilliant theory. We're working with them. We have worked with them to provide plaintiffs and other challengers to these insurrectionists to get them off the ballot, to return democracy to our nation in full flower. We're so excited to do that. We're so excited to speak to you about this and also to give you the opportunity to join our team. Among us are some of the folks you're going to meet tonight, in addition to John Bonifaz, who is a co-founder and president of the aforementioned Free Speech for People. We're also going to talk to Georgia plaintiff Mike Raspberry. I had the great honor of meeting Mike just a week ago, a little over a week ago now, in Georgia. He will tell us about his role in taking Marjorie Taylor Greene to court. We'll talk to Arizona plaintiff Carrie Good and her filing against Paul Gosar and others, Fincham and Biggs, in the Grand Canyon State. I was really delighted to get to speak earlier today to both Carrie and Mike, and also Anna Dralios in Pennsylvania and Virginia Tagle in North Carolina, two great progressive activists I've had the really great fortune to meet and work with as part of our 14.3 campaign. They are taking action with rallies, letters to their chief election officials, outreach, and others to bar the oath breakers from the ballot. So just real quick, you see a couple of different routes we're taking. The legal route with Free Speech for People, filing actions, bringing challenges in court, and also street heat, pressure on the election officials to do their job. They don't need to be told. They don't need a court order. But of course that would help. But they can do it on their own. They're tasked with, in fact, that's their duty under the law. And we're going to make sure that they know all about it. We'll be talking about that tonight. Their duty to bar insurrections from the ballot. So let me just tell you just very briefly, 2 weeks ago, because our members stood up to file the initial challenge against Marjorie Taylor Greene, and one brave, patriotic veteran, Mike Raspberry, you're going to meet with him, working with us and Free Speech for People. Because of Michael, because of John Bonifaz, because of his partner Ron Fine, Marjorie Taylor Greene had to answer questions under oath about her involvement in the January 6th insurrection. And she didn't look good. I mean, I was sitting right there. A lot of couldn't remembers, can't remembers, and it really defied belief. I mean, less than a year and a few months ago, she can't remember. I mean, this was an incredibly impactful day. I mean, it beggars belief that she couldn't remember. The outcome of that case, it's pending. will reverberate beyond Georgia, CNN wrote, reporting on our multiple challenges in the works. And they noted these complaints could well be lodged, doesn't take a genius to figure this one out, against former President Trump. We're also taking on Madison Cawthorn in North Carolina. When I say we, Free Speech for People is appealing a decision there. We've expanded our campaign to Arizona. I mentioned Arizona, where we have challenged, as I mentioned, Gosar, Andy Biggs, Mark Fincham. We'll be talking to a great Arizona activist, Kerry Good, later on this call. And we have filed actions by Free Speech for People against those three insurrectionists, including Fincham. I mentioned he was actually in the mob as a rioter and breached the Capitol. His partner in Arizona, Paul Gosar, on social media posted a caption, an image there you can see it, of the rioters scaling the walls with the caption, "Americans are upset." Well, we are. You're darn right we're upset. We're upset at the radical Republican right-wing shredding of our Constitution. The evidence, and you'll hear a lot of it tonight, against these anti-democratic extremists is damning. And yeah, hell, we're upset. We're angry. We're furious. We want this to end. We want our country to be taken back by the people. And that means a peaceful transfer of power. It's foundational to our democracy. That's why our members, our activists, folks we're working closely with, are taking concrete action to stop a descent into mob rule and political violence. We've got a great team. We've got a great core. I've talked about it. We need more. We want more progressive patriots. Folks on this call to step forward. Can we count on you to sign a petition targeting the chief election official in your state to join and to join our action? In other words, asking your chief election official to block insurrectionists from the ballot. The links are in the chat, and we'll see more of those, both to bar insurrectionists and to become, I mentioned, a democracy defender. So I went on a little long. People who have heard me in the past can't be surprised by that. And I want to welcome, without further ado, Free Speech for People's president and co-founder, John Bonifaz. Welcome, John. Great to be with you. Tell us very briefly about your organization, the one you founded, and what you're doing right now with us and other great activists.
Thank you, Hal. Thanks so much. It's great to be with all of you this evening. Free Speech for People was launched on the day of the U.S. Supreme Court's ruling in Citizens United v. FEC more than a decade ago, a ruling, as we know, that shredded the whole precedent of corporate money not being allowed in our elections, undoing a century of that precedent. And we have been involved in multiple fights for our democracy ever since, fighting to challenge big money in politics, to challenge voter suppression and voter intimidation, to challenge corruption in power, and now to challenge these insurrectionists who are seeking to be on the ballot after having taken an oath of office and engaged in insurrection in violation of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. We're proud at Free Speech for People to be partnering with our revolution in this fight, and we're proud to be working with all of you on this call in this campaign to ensure that the mandate of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment is upheld. Just to start with a little bit of background on why this provision is so critical in our Constitution. This was part of the 14th Amendment enacted after the Civil War during the Reconstruction era, and it was designed to address this particular provision of the 14th Amendment was designed to address the ex-Confederates who were in positions of government power or who sought positions of government power. And the framers of the 14th Amendment were quite clear that if you had taken an oath of office to defend the Constitution, and then you turned around and engaged in insurrection, the first insurrection in our nation's history was the Civil War, you are forbidden from ever holding public office again. And as a result of the enactment of that amendment to the Constitution, members of the Confederacy were removed from positions of government power. Half of the Tennessee Supreme Court was removed. People across the country faced accountability for their role in the insurrection. Now we have the second insurrection in our nation's history. January 6, 2021. And there are people who took an oath of office to defend our Constitution and engage in that insurrection and are now trying to appear on the ballot again. And this time, the mandate of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment must be applied again. And that includes Madison Cawthorn, it includes Marjorie Taylor Greene, it includes Andy Biggs, Paul Gosar, Mark Fincham, and there are others in this country who are seeking to be on the ballot who fit that category. And of course, it includes the inciter-in-chief, Donald Trump, should he seek to run again. So I fully agree with what Hal has said at the outset here. There are parallel tracks here of what is happening in this campaign. One track are the legal challenges that we have filed in North Carolina and Georgia and Arizona, and you're going to hear from voter challengers who are at the forefront of these challenges tonight. But in addition, there's the track of what we can do to pressure election officials all across the country to follow the mandate of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. Voter challenges are important to bring forward this whole provision of the Constitution and make clear it's upheld, but it's not the only way to enforce this section of the Constitution. Election officials have a mandate, have a responsibility to follow what the mandate of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment says. And when they are putting people on the ballot, they have to ensure that they haven't taken an oath of office and then engaged in insurrection. Just like they have to ensure that they meet the age qualification for the office, which is 25 if you want to run for Congress, or the residency qualifications or citizenship qualifications. All of these are in the Constitution, as is the qualification that you don't take an oath of office and then engage in insurrection. So just to briefly summarize where we are in these legal challenges. In North Carolina, we filed in early January against Madison Cawthorn. We ended up facing a challenge by Cawthorn in federal court, seeking to block the entire proceeding from going forward before the North Carolina Board of Elections. A courageous group of voters in his prior district that he sought to run in, the 13th Congressional District, had stood up to challenge him. And then when he moved over to the 11th Congressional District, new challengers came forward from that district to challenge him. And a judge, a Trump appointee, Judge Richard Myers in the Eastern District of North Carolina, federal court there, ruled that the Amnesty Act of 1872, which provided amnesty to some ex-Confederates after the enactment of the 14th Amendment, that somehow applied prospectively to all future insurrectionists as well, that it covers the ex-Confederates and it covers the Madison Cawthorn 150 years later. This was an absurd ruling, has no basis from the legislative history in the text of the Amnesty Act or the 14th Amendment, nor can Congress amend the Constitution by passing a statute. That's not how we amend the Constitution, as we know. And yet, that's what ended up blocking, at least temporarily, this proceeding from going forward before the North Carolina Board of Elections. Just today, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit heard our appeal on an expedited basis on behalf of our clients. And it was a vibrant hearing with a lot of questions for both sides. And we are hopeful that the court will do the right thing and recognize that the law is on our side, that ruling needs to be reversed, and that the voters have a right to have their challenge heard before the North Carolina State Board of Elections. In Georgia, as Hal has referenced, for the first time in our nation's history, a member of Congress has been placed under oath to testify about her role in an insurrection. That's Marjorie Taylor Greene. And it came about first because we filed a challenge to her candidacy under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. Then she rushed to federal court like Cawthorn did, but this time she met a different judge, Judge Amy Totenberg of the Northern District of Georgia. And Judge Totenberg in that federal district court issued a 73-page ruling on April 18th in which she made clear that Marjorie Taylor Greene did not have any basis to stop the proceeding from going forward before a state administrative law judge. That led to her on April 22nd having to take the stand and testify under oath. And as Hal said, she kept saying, I couldn't recall, I don't remember, more than 80 times to questions ranging from whether or not she was in contact with people leading up to the insurrection who were planning the pre-attack rally, to whether she knew there would be violence that day, to even whether she had discussed imposing martial law, urging Donald Trump or anyone in the White House to impose martial law to try to keep Donald Trump in power. And yet the following Monday, April 25th, texts came forward that revealed that in fact she had that very conversation with Mark Meadows, the former Trump chief of staff, urging that Donald Trump impose martial law to try to stay in power 3 days before the inauguration. That matter is pending before the Georgia State Administrative Law Judge. After he rules and makes a recommendation to reject either the challenge or to accept it and disqualify her, then it goes to the Secretary of State, who must have to decide, Brad Raffensperger, whether or not to put her on the ballot, and then either side can appeal into the Georgia state courts. And finally, in Arizona, we filed very recently a challenge to Andy Biggs, Congressman Andy Biggs, Congressman Paul Gosar, and State Representative Mark Fincham, who's running for Arizona Secretary of State, on the grounds that all of them as well engaged in this insurrection in different ways. And in that case, a Maricopa County Superior Court judge consolidated all the cases before him and decided that there would be no evidentiary hearing whatsoever on the grounds that, first, there was no private right of action, he found, for the voters to bring this challenge. They can challenge age qualifications, he said. They can challenge residency qualifications, but they can't challenge something as he saw it as a disqualification. He drew a distinction between qualifications and disqualifications. It's not a ruling that makes any real sense. Both of these kinds of qualifications exist in the Constitution, and we are appealing this before the Arizona Supreme Court. The second basis of his ruling was that the qualifications clause of the Constitution, which says that Congress and only Congress can decide who shall be seated, means that a state has no basis whatsoever to decide who goes on the ballot, who's running for Congress. As a result of his ruling, a 14-year-old can now run for Congress in Arizona and appear on the ballot, and there's no way the state can regulate that. They have to wait for Congress to decide whether or not that 14-year-old gets seated, or a foreign national can show up and run for Congress in Arizona, and the same result occurs there. No basis for the Arizona authorities to not place that person on the ballot. So we have an appeal before the Arizona Supreme Court on both of those counts. And on the merits, we believe it should be reversed, and we should go forward with evidentiary hearings against Biggs, Gosar, and Fincham. But I'll just close out in saying that these legal challenges are part of this campaign, but they're not the only part. And as I said at the outset, we all have a role we can play here with respect to ensuring that election officials do their duty all across the country and uphold the mandate of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, the Insurrectionist Disqualification Clause, and we must stand up to defend our democracy at this critical moment in history. Thank you.
All right, John, thank you so much. And as we've mentioned, we just really love working with Free Speech for People, and the legal eagles there are just unmatched. So it's great to work with them. And we're not saying goodbye to Free Speech for People tonight. We are saying goodbye for now to John, but we'll be speaking to his compatriot Alexandra Flores Quilty a little later on the call. So I'm really looking forward to that as well. And I also just want to commend all the folks who are putting volunteer in the chat. And I'm so pleased that we have a Coloradan. We've been looking for somebody from Colorado to help us challenge Lauren Boebert. So I'm really, really excited that we're going to expand into the Centennial State there. And you can tell I like to use state nicknames when I talk. All right, and now let's go down from I guess it's not south, right? It's Four Corners, but southwest of Colorado to Gilbert, Arizona, and Carrie L. Good. Carrie, good evening. It's great to see you.
Hi there. How are you, Al?
I'm well. I guess I should say afternoon because you're in the Pacific time zone there.
No,
so,
it's nighttime here, I guess. Almost 6 o'clock.
Is it in Gilbert?
Yeah.
And that's near Phoenix. Is that right?
That's correct.
Is one of those guys that we talked about, and they are all guys, Gosar, Biggs, or Fincham, do they represent you?
Biggs is my congressman, unfortunately, yes. And Mark Fincham is not my state rep, but he is running to become our Secretary of State in charge of all of our elections. Just imagine that. What could
Not
go
something I
wrong?
want to imagine, but
No.
if you have a question for Carrie, you can put it in the Q&A in the Zoom or on the phones. Please press star 3 for an operator to pass it along. So just briefly, Carrie, unfortunately we don't have that much time, and I'd love to talk to you for all night, but tell us a little bit about your activist background and then why you decided to join the 14.3 campaign.
Well, I wasn't an activist until we moved to Arizona. And when we moved here, Sheriff Joe Arpaio was actually the sheriff in Maricopa County. I'm sure everybody knows who he is. And I started thinking, well, I had some time. I was only working part-time, so I would, make phone calls for his opponent, Paul Penzone. And Penzone did not win that year, but it got my foot in the door. And then the next election came up, and Hillary was on the ballot, and also Paul Penzone again was running against Joe Arpaio. So, I started getting involved. I was making phone calls and stuff like that. But I have to say that once Donald Trump won for president, that was it. I couldn't sit still anymore. I couldn't just sit here and complain anymore. I felt I wasn't doing enough. I got involved in in my local legislative district, my Democratic district here, because I am a Democrat. And I became a member of one of the executive board, and we've raised money. We made phone calls, and I'm proud to say that we had a 93% turnout of Democrats in my district. But unfortunately, my district is quite red. And so now I'm still active. I was asked to become a plaintiff in this lawsuit, and I was proud and honored to be a plaintiff, as was my husband, Jim. And we are hoping that that the lawsuit goes forward, or that at least you'll be able to get these insurrectionists under oath. But I have to say that I am embarrassed, I am distressed, and I'm outraged that these people represent me in Congress. I mean, I don't even know what else to say. In fact, right before the call started, I got a call from Andy Biggs. Must be holding one of his town halls on the phone. He doesn't even meet with his constituents in person ever. You can never get a hold of him.
First of all, that's just amazing organizing, and I want to say, Carrie, good for you. And I'm glad you got my joke. Somebody has to. If I tell it to 200, 300, 5,000 people, one person will snicker. Carrie, what's your advice? We're going to have to move on in a moment to Georgia, but real quick, we do have folks who are interested in taking on Boebert in Colorado. Do you have advice for them?
Well, absolutely. You should be supporting their opponents. Whoever's running against them, support them. They need money. They need volunteers. They need people to make phone calls. And as far as supporting these lawsuits, support this organization. I'm sure they need contributions. They need volunteers too. It takes everybody. This is a lot of work. This is not easy work. It's very difficult. In fact, you really are swimming upstream. You're fighting against the establishment, basically.
Well, I want to thank you again so much, Carrie. And I also want to just welcome T. Gosar in the chat, who has identified themselves as that Paul Gosar is their brother. So that's pretty cool. We got T. Gosar on this call, and we'll be reaching out to you as well. And Carrie, I look forward to working with you again soon. Thanks so much for being on this call. Let's move back east to Mike Raspberry, my friend. Mike, we met in beautiful Hotlanta. You're from Chattanooga, right outside Chattanooga. Tell us about your role in taking Marjorie Taylor Greene to court. And welcome, Mike. There you are in with your clusters, your medals.
We spent a couple of days there in Atlanta. Free Speech for People was able to have Judge Totenberg. They impressed her, and she said Marjorie Taylor Greene needs to go and answer questions under oath. It was a day to behold. Free Speech for People lawyers, because I was at the federal hearing and then administrative hearing, so I got to know them, and they're well prepared. They knew what to ask. Marjorie Taylor Greene didn't have an answer for anything. She didn't know. She went out of her way to make you say, you're going to have to charge me for me to do anything. Otherwise, I don't know nothing. I mean, she was Sergeant Schultz all over again. Unfortunately, all of the emails that came out that weekend after her testimony, if they had come, say, 2 days before that testimony, it had been all over there at the hearing. And I'm not sure it's not all over now. I've read all of the briefs that Free Speech for People has sent me, and it's well researched. They're on top of it. Our Revolution Free Speech for People are a good team.
Well, I'll tell you what, you're a critical piece of that puzzle, a member of the team, Mike. And I was really impressed with the way you handled that press scrum. Tell us what that was like with MSNBC and all those TV station reporters interviewing you.
The first rule is that you don't ever answer a question that you don't know the answer to. It was easy. She's a big target, but this is about the 14th Amendment, Section 3. It could have been any of them, and there are a lot of them to go around. She just happens to be mine.
So, Mike, you were a helicopter pilot in Vietnam. Which took more courage, getting in that chopper or getting in the courtroom where you know there's going to be a lot of folks from your Northwest Georgia district who aren't going to be real thrilled with you?
That's not my problem. This needs to be handled. Somebody has to stand up. You and Free Speech for People, you came, you said, I'm going to do it, and you're doing it. Yeah, I sign on with you every day.
All right, man. Well, listen, it was great meeting with you. It's great talking to you again tonight. Mike, we'll work together again soon on this action and hopefully others as well.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Mike Raspberry from Georgia 14, where Marjorie Taylor Greene is currently the representative, but with fingers crossed, not for much longer. And heck, even if she wins that hearing, let's see, we can expect some good. Hopefully, we can hope for some common sense from the voters. I do want to move on, but I also saw an interesting question. When can we expect insurrectionists like MTG to be disqualified from the ballot based on the January 6th violence? That's what we're working on right now, Justin. That's what we're pushing. That's why we're bringing lawsuits. That's why John Bonifaz and his legal team have filed an action in Georgia, and that's why we're pressuring election officials across the state. I can't give you a date. We are expecting a decision relatively soon in Georgia, but that will not be the last word by any means. It will only be a recommendation, and then we'll go from there. So I do want to move on. We are just at the 9 o'clock hour here on the East Coast, so let me welcome Virginia Tagle, another friend I've made over the course of this campaign. Virginia is, there she is. She led the first action as part of our 14.3 campaign. And you can see the weather was a little cooler there. What was it? It was about 20 degrees, Virginia. Today you were out in Henderson County, Hendersonville, North Carolina, at the polls. What's the weather like today?
It was about 80 degrees, and it was a good day to work in the garden in my spare time.
You are a long time. Some of our folks have kind of got new to organizing. You heard Carrie just kind of really got into it recently. You're a longtime Bernie supporter, active as a teacher politically as well in the Midwest, now in, I'll do it, the Tar Heel State. Tell us why this was an action, this was an activity, challenging, organizing against Madison Cawthorn you could not say no to.
So when I first was looking at moving to the area, it was during the primary for the Republican seat. And I noticed a litter of campaign signs. And then, of course, I moved here and was immediately involved with voter protection in the election of 2020. And I learned more about this person, Madison Cawthorn. So I was quite dismayed that he was elected. And then since that time, if you followed the national news, there's been so many distractions that he's provided us in the way of ethics violations, law breaking, questionable personal behavior. But the thing of it is that the violation of the oath, 11.3, is the most egregious. It affects all of us. And it's shocking that this young man was elected into office. And I drive by his house. I've been to his congressional office. I've been by his campaign headquarters. He continues to flagrantly break the law, and he's done nothing for his constituents. We had a massive flood here in the spring. A number of people died. People are still homeless. And I'll just draw an analogy. You know, the studies show that campaign signs don't do anything to enhance the campaign. All they are for is for the candidate. And he's just a prime example of, again, an underling with Donald Trump's manifestation right here in Western North Carolina. So he needs to be gone. He needs to be off the ballot.
And again, our focus, as you know, in the 14.3 campaign is the violation of the U.S. Constitution. And while some of the targets, some of the people we challenge, we may look at their records and not necessarily be thrilled with them, that is not the legal basis for the challenge. It is that oath breaking, it is that violence, that action against the peaceful transfer of power, Virginia, and the desire, the not just the desire, the actual action to seize power contrary to the will of the people.
I would just like to add, I am an election worker, and I had to take an oath of office to work at the elections. And I took that very seriously, and that's what I expect my representative to do. So thank you for doing your good work to hold this person accountable.
I want to thank you so much. As I mentioned, it's great working with all the folks on this call, and I've had such a, I was excited to take on this responsibility, and it's worked out so well for me. And part of it is, of course, the conviction that if you take up arms against the United States government, you should not be in government. But the best part of it is meeting and working with people like John and Mike and Anna. We'll meet Anna in a moment, and Virginia, and now Carrie as well. So we are going to move on. I do want to say, if you want to put questions in the Q&A, we'll be happy to respond as best we can. And I think John did respond to that question about the Arizona Maricopa judge. How can you vote someone in based on qualifications, but not kick them out of the ballot for disqualifications? And yeah, I mean, it's just the question is whether they, if an election judge doesn't want to follow the law and doesn't want to take a stance that they think might be unpopular or at a minimum controversial, then we know judges will find a way out, and we're here to stop them from doing that, hold them accountable. So now I want to move to Anna Jalius. Anna Jalius in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And Anna, first of all, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. And maybe you're muted. I'm not sure. I know I saw you earlier.
Thank you for having me, and thank you all for joining us in this very important action that we need to take.
So Anna, we met back in, I think it was February, and it was also a chilly day in Harrisburg on the step right in front of the Secretary of Commonwealth's office building, and we had a real nice crowd. Tell us why you were part of that and why you helped organize that group.
Okay, well, I had an interesting childhood. I grew up in communist Albania, where we had no freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to vote for whoever we chose. As a child, we risked our lives to escape to Greece for these freedoms that we take for granted here in the United States. Right now, authoritarian leaders like Putin see freedom as dangerous, and they're willing to kill innocent people, as they're doing in Ukraine, to kill democracy. And this is sort of what's happening here in the United States. Democracies are fragile, and they should be protected. And right now, our democracy is in peril. This is not a partisan issue. This is not a left and right issue. We should all be scared, and we should all work to protect our elections and our democracy. These representatives, these members of Congress, perpetuated the big lie about the 2020 elections being stolen. But what worries me is about our future democracy and our future elections. Our democracy barely survived the 2020 elections. What will happen in 2024 if Trump is elected president? We have to think of the future of our democracy.
Well, Anna,
I don't want to belabor this.
Again, I've got a question or two for you. I want to tell folks, if you want to join Anna and all the other great organizers and activists and our revolution members as we challenge the insurrectionists, please you can type volunteer right in the chat. We'll follow up with you. But also, we do have a petition if you're in one of the states where we've got targets, and that does include Anna's state of Pennsylvania. I'm going to put that in the chat right now. We've got a survey we can do. We've also got petitions you can sign, and you can also volunteer as a democracy defender. So those are all great options. In Pennsylvania, Anna, we did get a response from your Secretary of Commonwealth, Lee Chapman, to our demand that she bar Doug Mastriano and look into Scott Perry. What was her response?
She said that she did not, she did not have the authority to stop or to disqualify people from getting in the ballot. But we believe that she does have the authority, and we will continue pressuring her. We're not going to stop. We have a petition going on, as you said, Hal, that's going across the state. People are signing, urging Secretary Chapman to disqualify Mastriano, Representative Mastriano, from the ballot. Mastriano, he is one of the representatives who named a slate of alternate electoral college electors for Trump. He sponsored a resolution to undo Biden's certification in Pennsylvania. And he organized buses to the Capitol on January 6th and was seen outside of the Capitol on that day. To me, that is being an insurrectionist, and he should not be in the ballot. He's running for governor of Pennsylvania. So this is unacceptable. He cannot be our governor.
And you have real concerns about Scott Perry as well, and you want Secretary Chapman to investigate his role. And tell us briefly, if you can, why you're very concerned about Scott Perry.
Okay, Scott Perry he leads the right-wing House Freedom Caucus, and we believe that he's dangerous. We believe that there is, especially with the news that we've gotten recently, with all the texts that came out, and we believe that there's incontrovertible evidence that he conspired a coup, and I think he needs to be investigated, but I think he also needs to be, there should be a lawsuit against him. He sought to reverse or delay the certification of Joe Biden's victory. He pushed for the investigation of the debunked claims that China had hacked the Dominion voting machines. He approved alternate electors. He endorsed the idea of encouraging supporters to march to the Capitol, even after they were told that violence was possible. He encouraged Trump to replace acting AG Rosen with Clark. He was a minor official. And as Trump said, I don't know if you remember this, all the AG had to do was say that the DOJ, the Department of Justice, was investigating Georgia's election results, and Trump's members of Congress would do the rest. And guess who one of Trump's members of Congress was? Perry, among Jordan and the others. He tried to pressure the Department of Justice into corroborating false claims about the voting machines being corrupted. And of course, in Congress, he led the objection to certifying the election results in Pennsylvania hours after the violent mob attack.
Wow. Well, you are a good prosecutor. You're a great prosecutor. You laid out a very powerful case on Adralios. And I, again, am in awe of the organizers on the ground who are so knowledgeable and have taken it upon themselves to just become the experts on these insurrectionists. Anna, thank you so much. We'll work together soon. I'll be up there in Harrisburg working with you guys, and I look forward to it. Thank you. And we are going to now move on. We have spoken to our great on-the-ground organizers, and now I want to speak to and bring on John's partner, Alexandra Flores-Quilty. And Alexandra, I don't ever remember titles, so what? You're like the policy director or something over there. I don't know what it is. So here's Alexandra, and there she is speaking in the slide. So tell us, Alexandra, how much you're enjoying working with these great folks.
Yeah, absolutely. It's inspiring this evening to be joined by so many of the leaders from across the country who have bravely stood up and taken action in this really critical time in our democracy. And it's been an absolute honor, not just this evening, but for the last few months now, several months almost, that we've really been working on this campaign and working with leaders from across the country. And we know that this is just the beginning, that this is a really critical fight, and that our democracy needs us to stand up and speak loud and clearly of what we will not tolerate, and that we must have accountability. And I think that this campaign is so important right now for so many different reasons. But, when we talk about the January 6th insurrection, folks might ask themselves, should we just wait for the Department of Justice to take action? Should we just wait for the House Select Committee to continue its process? And while the efforts underway there are important, and especially at the House Select Committee, we continue to learn feels like every day we learn new egregious information about different people's roles, different insurrectionist roles in the January 6th insurrection. But that being said, in order for us to see true action, we haven't seen that much accountability or action yet. And at the same time, we see the insurrectionists who have violated this critical provision of the Constitution are seeking the ballot now. And, this is written in our Constitution for a reason, and the people that need to enforce that are actually us. We need to demand that secretaries of state and chief election officials do their job and uphold the Constitution. And, to be frank with you all, we know that it's not a low-lift ask to ask, a Secretary of State to enforce this part of the Constitution, which hasn't needed to be enforced for, well over a century. However, it is the right thing to do. And what's really going to give them that motivation, potentially the cover, is really having a large chorus of people, of voters from each state, really demanding loud and clear that enforcement of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment needs to happen. So imagine that, we have a national movement that, we're already building now. All of you, the hundreds of folks who are joining in via Zoom, the hundreds of folks who are joining in via other platforms right now, we're building this movement. We have been building it, and we need to continue to build it, because it's really going to take a movement in order for us to see accountability for those insurrectionists who really launched an assault on our democracy. And as John and others have stated, the legal efforts of this are important and are impactful. But really, where what we can all do, and where this is actually going to come down to in a big way, is actually everyday people calling on their secretaries of state and chief election officials to bar Trump as the insider in chief and the other relevant insurrectionists, calling on them to bar them from the ballot. And you don't need to launch a legal complaint to do that. Every Secretary of State, even if those who are trying to, skirt their responsibility because, they're afraid to take action, they have the power to do that right now, right? If someone who's, 17 years old tries to run from office, it will be the Secretary of State's office in that particular state that will not allow them to appear on the ballot. Or if someone is not a citizen and citizenship is required, or then they'll not allow that person to appear on the ballot. Or if there are other qualifications of, living within the relevant district or state, et cetera, they already do this. So if someone has violated this key provision of the Constitution, they have the power and they can do this. But it's really going to take us making a loud and clear demand that we need them to uphold the Constitution. And so this is why we need to launch statewide campaigns in every single state in the country. And I say statewide because where the decision-making really lies, if it hasn't already been clear, where that lies within our democracy of barring people from the ballot come down to secretaries of state and states and chief election officials. So each one of us has either a designated person or a board of electors within our designated state, and we have resources for you to know who's the decision maker in your state. So we can launch statewide campaigns in every single state in the country to put pressure on these folks and get them to do their jobs. And the first action that everyone can take right now, right here on this call, is to sign the petition. So we're going to put the links for the petition there in the chat right now. If you have not already signed it, please do. And we also have launched statewide specific petitions for states where there's already been a kickoff of a statewide campaign, where there's already folks there, like some of the folks that we just heard from this evening, who are standing up and actually taking leadership and organizing a strategic, coordinated statewide campaign to really call on and urge those chief election officials to take action. So we have some of those statewide specific petitions, but there's also a national petition that every single one of you can sign. And this is really important. It's an easy and very impactful way to really show and put pressure on these folks that this is the will of the people, that there is a public mandate for them to bar these insurrectionists from the ballot. And the second action that every single person can take tonight, and some of you probably have already signed the petitions, the second action is if you can commit right now to getting 10 friends, 10 family members, 10 people that you know to also sign that petition, sign the state specific one or sign the national. Doing that will really help us ramp up those numbers. And when we hit critical mass of numbers in these key states, we're going to go to those chief election officials. We're going to do a petition delivery, and we're really going to be able to make a public demonstration about that this is the public mandate that they need to bar insurrectionists from the ballot. And in addition, after you've signed up on the petition, that you've gotten 10 folks or 10 friends to sign, if you can do more, great. Next, we'll follow up with you and we'll ask if you're willing to take further action with us in your state. This will include going to in-person demonstrations. If you're willing to actually take leadership and organize demonstrations, that would be incredible. But we really need to build a true movement here in order to see real action. I think that's very possible. We've already heard from so many incredible leaders this evening who bravely stood up in their states and taken action this particular way. The movement just continues to grow, but we really need you in order to make it the impact that we need. So I see that the petition's being included there in the chat. So please sign up, get your friends to sign, and sign up to also volunteer so we can start to continue to ramp up demonstrations and actions. And I'll turn it back over to you, Hal.
All right. Well, thanks, Alexandra. I wanted to say, if you do sign that petition, it's akin to signing up to volunteer, because we will follow up with all the signers. And when I say we, that's Alexandra and I. So we'll be following up with you to ask you to get even more involved and to maybe get involved in direct action or letter writing. And I did want to ask Alexandra this question from Karen. She answered it without my asking it, which was, how can I get involved without having to do a lot of phone calling and phone banking? And actually, we're really not asking for much phone calling or phone banking. We're sharing our petition on social media. We're asking friends and family to sign. We're going to get involved in going to our secretaries of state or other chief election officials. So this is not a phone call heavy kind of assignment. And I am going to ask if we can speak to someone who's ready to volunteer right now in just a moment. But I do want to bring back, if I can, if John Bonifaz is still with us. John, I had a couple of questions in the Q&A. I was really thinking of you to answer. This is, what about other state officers or federal officers? Can we look to the Justice Department? Can we look to, say, governors of a state to maybe block insurrectionists? Is that a viable path?
Thank you, Hal, for that question. There's no question that Congress could, if it wanted to, enact enabling legislation that would leave the Justice Department to have the authority to engage in prosecutions of people who have effectively violated their oath of office by engaging in this insurrection. That happened right after the Civil War, after the 14th Amendment was enacted. There was enabling legislation allowed for federal prosecutors to, as I mentioned earlier, remove half of the Tennessee Supreme Court, for example, because of their role in the Civil War in the Confederacy. But that enabling legislation for prosecutions is not necessary for state election officials to do their duty. So it would be helpful if Congress were to do that and have the Department of Justice involved with respect to Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. But it's not required as a precondition for state election officials to do their duty. And I would just add, because I've seen some questions in the chat about, well, I'm from Massachusetts, and for example, there doesn't seem to be necessarily an insurrectionist on the ballot right now. And I actually live in Massachusetts. And what I would say for those who live in a state like this, or even in another state where you think you're not facing, as some of the people who've been on this call have talked about in Arizona or Georgia or North Carolina, you're not facing an insurrectionist on your ballot right now. We know that the inciter-in-chief is potentially going to be running again, Donald Trump. And in every state, he's going to need to be on that state ballot in order to run. And so every state is in play, Massachusetts, California, wherever you may be. The question is going to be before your chief election official, are they going to carry out the duty and the mandate of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, or are they going to stay on the sidelines? And so this is why this campaign is so important for all of us all across the country.
Thank you so much. Great talking to you. And before we close out this call, I am going to ask for someone who would like to volunteer and who is already getting involved in our campaign to speak up. So do we have Kristen Magus? I know you have indicated that you are already involved and you want to become even more involved. Kristen in Oregon, tell us real quick about your steps to hold accountable Trump in the Beaver State there, Oregon.
Hi, everybody. I do want to help block the insurrectionists, in particular the chief insurrectionist and disgraced ex-president here in Oregon. My father had to flee his home country of Estonia to escape the Soviet Russians. And he always taught me how precious and fragile freedom and democracy are. But I grew up taking it all for granted. And I realize now that we have a real life, well-organized attack on our democracy at all levels of government. And I realize that now is the time for me to step up and take action. So I've been looking for a real high leverage strategy to help protect our democracy. And I believe that this is it, in a way that I can help to protect my kids and my grandkids and the 6 generations coming behind us to protect our democracy.
Thank you so much, Kristen. That is just awesome. Love to hear that. And we are now going to let you folks go and enjoy the rest of your evening. We will wrap with our chant, which is, as you know, it's a call and response. I'll say, when we organize,
We win.
we win. When we organize,
We win.
win. Have a great night, everybody. Thank you so much. And we'll continue to organize together to block insurrectionists from the ballot.